The economic consequences of President Trump. Is the dollar being devalued by stealth? That old trilemma. By Grub Street in Exile. Panic of 1837 money. Some omissions worth expanding on. The BIS, the central bank of central banks. Definition of the unit of account. Is money a measure? An honest measure must be fixed as opposed to rigged. The Jeffersonian view is pro-honest money and congressional oversight. The Hamiltonian view is decidedly elitist, Whig-like. Walter Burian's A Rock Thrown in the Pond. In the link, Rulers of the World, Michael Journal in the link. Walter Burian's A Rock Thrown in the Pond. Rulers of the World, Michael Journal. A huge subject. Start with Aristotle and end with Alexer's comment on the Golem 14 blog in May 2013. Hi Ranjan. As you know, I've been trying to get a read on the economic game plan vis the new international monetary arrangements. My sense is that the usual false trails are being trotted out and the level of FUD is revving up. This on Gail Trevberg's emergence onto Substack. https://gailtverberg.substack.com/p/economic-contraction-comment/121068894. And Wisties lament a few weeks back now on the boom finance and economics thread. I am getting closer to getting it, but no nearer to explaining it. Banking crisis timeline. Framework of players. What is a trilemma? Trilemma is a term in economic decision-making theory. Unlike a dilemma, which has two solutions, a trilemma offers three equal solutions to a complex problem. A trilemma suggests that countries have three options from which to choose when making fundamental decisions about managing their international monetary policy agreements. However, the options of the trilemma are conflictual because of mutual exclusivity, which makes only one option of the trilemma achievable at a given time. Trilemma often is synonymous with the and quote, impossible trinity, end quote, also called the Mundell-Fleming trilemma. This theory exposes the instability inherent in using the three primary options available to a country when establishing and monitoring its international monetary policy agreements. Key takeaways. The trilemma is an economic theory which posits that countries may choose from three options when making fundamental decisions about their international monetary policy agreements. However, only one option of the trilemma is achievable at a given time, as the three options of the trilemma are mutually exclusive. Today, most countries favor free flow of capital and autonomous monetary policy. Trilemma explained. When making fundamental decisions about managing international monetary policy, a trilemma suggests that countries have three possible options from which to choose. According to the Mundell-Fleming trilemma model, these options include setting a fixed currency exchange rate, allowing capital to flow freely with no fixed currency exchange rate agreement, autonomous monetary policy. 1. The technicalities of each option conflict because of mutual exclusivity. As such, mutual exclusivity makes only one side of the trilemma triangle achievable at a given time. Evaluate a devaluation of the petrodollar by 30% and calculate the value of U.S. tariffs as a proportionate increase in import prices to offset the value of the dollar devaluation. Consider then a U.S. dollar reserve currency based on Bitcoin prices and gold to reset the dollar at a BTC/gold standard and calculate the dominance of the US dollar based upon a gold-backed dollar as reserve currency. Monica Sonnet. I'll help you analyze this complex monetary scenario step by step. Petrodollar devaluation analysis. Let's calculate the effects of a 30% devaluation. Original value, 1 US dollar. After 30% devaluation, 70 cents. Tariff calculation to offset devaluation. To offset a 30% currency devaluation, the tariff rate would need to be approximately 42.86% to restore the original purchasing power. Tariff rate equals 10.70 minus 1 equals 0.4286 or 42.86%. Tariff rate equals 0.701 minus 1 is equal to 0.4286 or 42.86%. Is there an ongoing devaluation of the dollar by stealth? Peak Oil, the non-evidence, whose shoes in Donald shining. Hashtag petrodollar, hashtag peak oil, hashtag money, hashtag tariffs, hashtag going direct, hashtag bond crisis, hashtag best evidence. To evaluate the devaluation of the petrodollar by 30% and its impact on U.S. tariffs, as well as to explore the implications of a U.S. dollar backed by Bitcoin and gold, we can break this down into several steps. Step 1. Evaluate the impact of a 30% devaluation of the petrodollar. Initial value. Assume the current value of the petrodollar is VV. Devaluation calculation. New value equals V times 1 minus 0.30 equals 0.70 V. New value equals V times 1 minus 0.30 equals 0.70 V. Step 2. Calculate the required increase in import prices. To offset the devaluation, we need to consider how much U.S. tariffs would need to increase to maintain the same purchasing power for imports. Increased cost of imports. If the dollar loses 30% of its value, the cost of imports will effectively increase by 30% unless tariffs are adjusted. Tariff adjustment. Let TT be the new tariff rate required to offset the devaluation. The relationship can be expressed as new import price equals old import price times 1 plus T equals old import price times 1 plus 0.30. New import price equals old import price times 1 plus T equals old import price times 1 plus 0.30. This implies T equals 0.30 or 30%. T equals 0.30 or 30%. Step 3. Exploring a Bitcoin/gold standard for the US dollar. Establishing a new standard. If the US dollar were to be backed by Bitcoin and gold, we would need to determine the current values of these assets. Assume price of gold, PGPG, in USD per ounce. Price of Bitcoin, PBPB, in USD per BTC. Total gold reserves, RGRG, in ounces. Total Bitcoin holdings, RBRB, in BTC. Total value of reserves, total value PGRG, PBRB, total value PGRG, PBRB. Resetting the dollar value. If we want to reset the dollar based on this total value, we need to determine how many dollars would be backed by each unit of value. If DD is the total amount of dollars in circulation, the new value of the dollar could be represented as new dollar value equals total value d new dollar value equals d total value. Step 4. Assessing the dominance of the US dollar. Historical context. The dominance of the US dollar has historically been supported by its status as the world's primary reserve currency, largely due to its backing by gold until 1971 and its continued use in international trade. Current dominance factors. Factors affecting the dollar's dominance today include economic stability, trade balances, foreign reserves held in USD by other countries, confidence in U.S. financial institutions, gold standard implications. If the US dollar were to revert to a gold-backed system, it would limit the ability of the U.S. government to print money freely, potentially stabilizing inflation. However, it could also lead to deflationary pressures if the money supply does not grow in line with economic growth. Conclusion. Impact of devaluation. A 30% devaluation of the petrodollar necessitates a proportional increase in tariffs of about 30% to maintain import price levels. Value reset via gold and Bitcoin. Establishing a new dollar standard based on Bitcoin and gold requires a careful calculation of current asset values and total dollar circulation. Future of the dollar. Transitioning to a gold-backed dollar could stabilize the currency, but may also restrict monetary policy flexibility, echoing Keynes' concerns about the rigidity of the gold standard. If you need further calculations or specific examples based on current market values, feel free to ask. John Maynard Keynes' critique of Britain's return to the gold standard in 1925 provides a profound insight into the economic challenges and consequences of adhering to rigid monetary policies. Below is an analysis of the key points from the excerpt you provided, along with their implications for economic policy. Key themes in Keynes' critique. 1. Restoration of the gold standard at high parity. Argument. Keynes argues that Britain returned to the gold standard at an unsustainable pre-war parity, which did not reflect the post-war economic realities. Implication: this decision ignored the necessary adjustments in money values and wages, leading to deflationary pressures that could harm employment and economic growth. 2. Misjudgment by experts. Analysis of experts' mistakes. Keynes suggests that the financial experts miscalculated the degree of maladjustment in money values. They relied on inappropriate price index numbers, which did not accurately reflect the internal economic conditions. Consequences: this misjudgment led to an underestimation of the gap that needed to be bridged to return to the gold standard, potentially setting the stage for economic turmoil. 3. Challenges of reducing money values. Technical difficulties. Keynes highlights the complexity of reducing money wages and values across the economy. He argues that simply raising the value of sterling would disproportionately benefit rentiers, those who earn income from investments, at the expense of the broader population. Economic adjustment. He emphasizes that achieving a simultaneous reduction in money wages and costs would be challenging and could lead to significant unemployment and social unrest. 4. Potential economic consequences. Unemployment and industrial disputes. Keynes warns that the policy of reducing wages to adjust to the gold standard would likely lead to widespread unemployment and conflicts within industries. Political risks. He notes the political unpopularity of such measures, suggesting that the government would need to obscure the true reasons for rising unemployment to maintain public support. Conclusion. Keynes' analysis serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of rigid adherence to gold standards without considering the broader economic context. His arguments remain relevant today, particularly in discussions about monetary policy, economic stability, and the balance between inflation and deflation. Implications for modern economic policy. Flexibility in monetary policy. Keynes' critique underscores the importance of flexible monetary policy that can adapt to changing economic conditions rather than rigidly adhering to fixed standards. Importance of accurate economic indicators. Accurate assessment of economic indicators is crucial for effective policymaking. Reliance on outdated or inappropriate measures can lead to significant economic missteps. Social considerations in economic policies. Policymakers must consider the social implications of economic adjustments, particularly the potential for increased unemployment and social unrest. If you have specific questions or need further analysis on any aspect of Keynes' critique or its relevance today, feel free to ask. Mr. Churchill asked the Treasury Committee on the Currency to advise him on these matters. He declared in his budget speech that their report, in quote, contains a reasoned marshalling of the arguments which have convinced His Majesty's government. End quote. Their arguments, if their vague and jejune meditations can be called such, are there for anyone to read. What they ought to have said, but did not say, can be expressed as follows. Money wages, the cost of living, and the prices which we are asking for our exports have not adjusted themselves to. The improvement in the exchange, which the expectation of your restoring the gold standard, in accordance with your repeated declarations, has already brought about. They are about 10% too high. If therefore you fix the exchange at this gold parity, you must either gamble on a rise in gold prices abroad, which will induce foreigners to pay a higher gold price for our exports, or you are committing yourself to a policy of forcing down money wages and the cost of living to the necessary extent. End quote. We must warn you that this latter policy is not easy. It is certain to involve unemployment and industrial disputes. If, as some people think, real wages were already too high a year ago, that is all the worse, because the amount of the necessary wage reductions in terms of money will be all the greater. End quote. The gamble on a rise in gold prices abroad may quite likely succeed. But it is by no means certain, and you must be prepared for the other contingency. If you think that the advantages of the gold standard are so significant and so urgent that you are prepared to risk great unpopularity and to take stern administrative action in order to secure them, the course of events will probably be as follows. End quote. To begin with, there will be great depression in the export industries. This, in itself, will be helpful, since it will produce an atmosphere favorable to the reduction of wages. The cost of living will fall somewhat. This will be helpful too, because it will give you a good argument in favor of reducing wages. Nevertheless, the cost of living will not fall sufficiently, and consequently, the export industries will not be able to reduce their prices sufficiently, until wages have fallen in the sheltered industries. Now, wages will not fall in the sheltered industries merely because there is unemployment in the unsheltered industries. Therefore, you will have to see to it that there is unemployment in the sheltered industries also. The way to do this will be by credit restriction. By means of the restriction of credit by the Bank of England, you can deliberately intensify unemployment to any required degree until wages do fall. When the process is complete, the cost of living will have fallen too, and we shall then be, with luck, just where we were before we started. End quote. We ought to warn you, though perhaps this is going a little outside our proper sphere, that it will not be safe politically to admit that you are intensifying unemployment deliberately in order to reduce wages. Thus you will have to ascribe what is happening to every conceivable cause except the true one. We estimate that about 2 years may elapse before it will be safe for you to utter in public one single word of truth. By that time you will either be out of office, or the adjustment, somehow or other, will have been carried through. End quote. Source: Keynes, John M., 1925. The Economic Consequences of Mr. Churchill, London, XXX, pages 10 to 13. https://www.org/web/2022881526/www.gold.org/sites/default/files/documents/1925july.pdf. You've raised several complex questions regarding economic history, particularly focusing on the banking system, the role of influential figures like George Soros, and the broader implications of monetary policy. Let's break down your queries and provide some insights. 1. Who lent the money to George Soros to end quote, break the Bank of England end quote? George Soros, through his hedge fund, the Quantum Fund, did not borrow money in the traditional sense to execute his famous trade against the British pound in 1992. Instead, he leveraged capital by borrowing large amounts of currency through various financial instruments and agreements, allowing him to short the pound. The total position he took was substantial, estimated at around $10 billion. Key points. Leverage. Soros used leverage, meaning he borrowed funds from financial institutions to increase his trading capacity. Market dynamics. His actions were also supported by a network of investors and speculators who followed his lead, contributing to the rapid decline of the pound's value. 2. Who knew about the £2.5 billion loss in the end quote, snake end quote, in 1972. The end quote, snake in the tunnel end quote, was an arrangement aimed at stabilizing exchange rates among European currencies. The loss of £2.5 billion within 8 weeks of membership was significant, and it highlighted the vulnerabilities inherent in fixed exchange rate systems. Key points. Government awareness. British officials, including those in the Treasury and the Bank of England, were aware of the risks associated with joining the snake. The speculative pressures and subsequent losses were discussed internally. Public knowledge. The broader public and many economists recognized the potential for failure, especially given the economic conditions at the time. However, the extent of the impending crisis may not have been fully appreciated until it was too late. Broader implications. The discussions surrounding figures like Mark Carney, the historical context of banking, and the ongoing debates about monetary policy reflect deeper issues in economic governance and the influence of financial institutions on national policy. The historical admissions regarding the creation of money by banks, as noted by Reginald McKenna, remain relevant today as they underpin the ongoing discussions about the role of central banks and financial regulation. Key takeaways. Historical context. The evolution of the banking system, particularly the establishment of the Bank of England and its implications for national debt and monetary policy, is crucial for understanding contemporary financial crises. Public discourse. Figures like Mark Carney are prominent in public discourse due to their roles in navigating complex economic challenges, such as the 2008 financial crisis and Brexit-related economic policies. Conclusion. Your inquiry connects historical events to current economic discussions, highlighting the cyclical nature of financial crises and the ongoing debates about the power dynamics within economic systems. If you have more specific questions or need further elaboration on any particular aspect, feel free to ask. What next for the money power? Snakes and adders. Hashtag Conquestofto. Hashtag COVID Purpose the Carbon Gold Standard. December 30th, 2020. This is a long post. My initial question to myself was, who lent the money to George Soros to break the Bank of England? This post resulted, and I am digesting the linkages and pondering the questions arising. Why is Mark Carney being afforded such a prominent position in our public discourse? What next for the money power? The admissions of 1924. The year 1924 will always be remembered by students of economic history as the year in which Reginald McKenna blew the gaff on the banking system in his now famous admission to the shareholders of the Midland Bank in January 1924. I am afraid the ordinary citizen will not like to be told that the banks can and do create money. The amount of money in existence varies only with the action of the banks in increasing and decreasing deposits and bank purchases. Every loan, overdraft, or bank purchase creates a deposit, and every repayment of a loan, overdraft, or bank sale destroys a deposit. And they who control the credit of a nation, direct the policy of governments, and hold in the hollow of their hands the destiny of the people. Let's get the charges of anti-Semitism out of the way first. https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/Eric_Butler. Eric Dudley Butler, May 7, 1916 to June 7, 2006, was an Australian political activist and journalist who in 1946 founded the far-right Australian League of Rights, which he led until 1992. He was known as a staunch anti-communist and virulent anti-Semite. He died in Victoria in 2006, aged 90. https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/c._h._Douglas. Death and legacy. Douglas died in his home in Fearnan, Scotland. Douglas and his theories are referred to several times, unsympathetically, in Lewis Grossick Gibbon's trilogy A Scots Quaere. He is also mentioned, together with Karl Marx and Silvio Gesell, by John Maynard Keynes in The General Theory of Employment, Interest and Money, 1936, page 32. Douglas's theories permeate the poetry and economic writings of Ezra Pound. Robert Heinlein's first novel for us, The Living, a comedy of customs, describes a near-future United States operating according to the principles of social credit. The real fight was between the money power and monarchy, culminating in the victory of the money power in 1688, when James II was driven off the throne by his son-in-law, William III, who was brought to Britain at the behest of the financial interests. The Bank of England was formed 6 years later, 1694, and with it began the national debt. The bank was established for the purpose of lending money to the crown and was modeled on the Bank of Amsterdam, founded in 1609, which was the first bank in Northern Europe. The part played by Jews in the formation of the modern banking system, together with the modern stock exchange, was considerable. Calvinism is arguably by far the most telling influence on the course of British political economy. See Thierry Meyssan. The desire for a Jewish homeland among the Jewish diaspora is commonly understood to explain the origins of political Zionism in the mid-late 19th century, but that is only part of the story. This article is a brief introduction to the key role of the inheritors of Oliver Cromwell's Commonwealth in its realization in the State of Israel by actively seeking to harness the diaspora to their purposes. Calvin said Belloc characterized the Reformation as a rising of the rich against the poor, and indeed Calvin had written the unfortunate statement, "The people must always be kept in poverty in order that they remain obedient." Sir John Hublin, March 13, 1632 to January 10, 1712, was the first governor of the Bank of England from 1694 to 1697. The Hublin family were Huguenots from Lille, and he later became an elder in the French Protestant Church of London in Threadneedle Street. 1. He married Mary Jurin in 1660, who came from a Flemish Protestant family, and they had 5 sons and 6 daughters, but only 2 sons survived their father. They lived in a magnificent house just off Threadneedle Street on the site later occupied by the Bank of England, and he also acquired a country house at High Ongar in Essex. 2. He became Sheriff of the City of London in 1689, an alderman from 1689 to 1712, and Master of the Grocers' Company from 1690 to 1691. He was Lord Mayor in 1695. He was a Lord Commissioner of the Admiralty from 1694 to 1699. It was during this time, from 1694 until 1697, that he served as inaugural governor of the Bank of England. 3. He was again a Bank of England director from 1700 and a director of the New East India Company from 1700 to 1701. He stood as a parliamentary candidate for the City of London in 1701, but was defeated. Some sources state incorrectly that he was Member of Parliament for Bodmin. 4. His younger brother, Abraham Hublin, was also Bank of England governor from 1703 to 1705. A daughter of Abraham Hublin, and was married to Henry Temple, later Viscount Palmerston, in 1703. His older brother, James, an influential merchant and Member of Parliament for the City of London, was also a director of the Bank of England. 5. 4 other of his brothers were prosperous merchants. 6. https://www.bankofengland.co.uk/dash/media/bo/files/archive/original-bank-subscribers/16948 n ampersand #A8027ADBA 218D0C588YF8F301D6425C4F 3DC851D https://warwick.ac.uk/fac/people/kettle/research/erm.pdf William Patterson and the Darien Scheme https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/Darien_scheme What a tangled web we weave when first we practice to deceive. The conventional view is that Britain joined both at the wrong time, namely on the verge of an impending recession, and at the wrong exchange rate, with the pound, by most estimates, deemed to have been around 10% overvalued. This, so it is argued, required honorously high levels of interest rates in order to keep sterling within its ERM bandwidths, severely exacerbated the effects of the recession, and ultimately undermined the credibility of the government's commitment to the regime, leading to sterling's ejection from it on Black Wednesday in September 1992. In sum, for all its noble aims, membership of the ERM is emblazoned across Britain's 20th century experience as one of its most inglorious policy episodes. As Budd 2005-15 explains, the commonly held view is that our membership of the ERM was a disaster and was always doomed to fail. Or as Thompson 1995-248 puts it, joining the ERM brought no benefits to the UK at all. The story of policymaking on ERM is thus one of missed opportunities, chronic misperception by British policymakers, and huge welfare losses for the British economy, unequivocally a policy disaster. Historical context of the exchange rate mechanism, ERM. The exchange rate mechanism was intended by its designers as a step towards European monetary union. However, monetary union was not mentioned as an aim in the Treaty of Rome signed in 1957, which provided for the founding of the European Communities, now the European Union. It was agreed by the original 6 founding members, which excluded Britain, at a summit meeting of heads of government at The Hague in 1969, for years before Britain joined. The 6 founding members argued that exchange rate stability was necessary for the common price system of the Common Agricultural Policy, to encourage trade between member states, and above all, to give Europe more weight in a world economy dominated by the volatile American dollar. The Prime Minister of Luxembourg was commissioned to produce a report on the subject, proposing that monetary union should be achieved by 1980. This was agreed upon by the 6 at a summit in Paris in 1972, and endorsed by Edward Heath's pro-European conservative government. A precursor to the ERM was set up called the Snake, by which members agreed to peg their currencies to each other. However, the Snake soon ran into trouble due to the instability of the dollar during the final stages of the Vietnam War and the subsequent rise in oil prices following the Yom Kippur War in 1973, leading to its abandonment in 1979. Britain joined the Snake in 1972, but remained in it for just 8 weeks before speculative pressures against the currency forced an exit, resulting in a loss of $2.5 billion in foreign exchange reserves in just 6 days. This was a precursor to what would later happen with the ERM, and upon leaving the Snake, Britain reverted to a floating currency. Fundamental policy changes post-1974. If 1974 was a year of unreality, 1975 proved to be a year of fundamental policy changes, with 4 significant shifts that divided the post-1974 period from the pre-1975 period. Abandonment of full employment commitment. The first fundamental change was the abandonment of the commitment to full employment in favor of prioritizing the conquest of inflation. This change was announced in Healey's 1975 budget, where he stated that rising unemployment could not be addressed through increased demand, as financing the balance of payments deficit by borrowing was no longer feasible. Instead, he proposed shifting resources from domestic demand to balance the payments, contradicting traditional Keynesian theory. Imposition of cash limits. The second major change occurred in Healey's second budget of July 1975, where he imposed cash limits on policy programs. Previously, if inflation increased the cost of a program, additional funds were provided. Under the new policy, all programs, except for Social Security cash payments, would be fixed in cash terms, not adjusted for inflation. Reduction in public spending. The third change involved questioning the previously strong belief in labor circles that growth in public spending was inherently beneficial. Healey argued in cabinet that cuts to public expenditure might not be unpopular, citing public sentiment against welfare dependency. Introduction of a voluntary incomes policy. The fourth change was a voluntary incomes policy introduced in July 1975, which acknowledged that due to rising oil prices, living standards would need to decrease by approximately 2.5% over the year. Despite these changes, Healey faced backlash within the Labour Party, leading to his removal from the national executive in September 1975. The fundamental changes he implemented occurred before Margaret Thatcher's government took power in 1979 and prior to the IMF intervention in 1976. Economic challenges and the 1976 IMF crisis. The new policies had some success, particularly in wage settlements, but 1976 marked a turning point as confidence in the government's economic policies faltered. The pound reached a record low against the dollar, exacerbated by fears of inflation and insufficient support from within the Labour Party. Following a defeat in the House of Commons regarding public expenditure, the government was forced to borrow $3.9 billion from the International Monetary Fund, IMF, the largest loan ever requested at that time. Dennis Healey, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, announced the application for the loan during a Labour Party conference, receiving a mixed reaction from party members. The loan allowed the UK to stabilize its economy while implementing drastic budget cuts, but it also highlighted divisions within the Labour Party, contributing to its eventual electoral defeat in 1979. The Black Wednesday crisis. As the economic situation deteriorated, the British government faced mounting pressure from speculators. George Soros and the Quantum Fund borrowed heavily against the pound, initiating a massive short-selling campaign. By the time London markets opened, billions of pounds had been sold, pushing the currency close to breaching ERM limits. The Bank of England initially attempted to stabilize the pound by purchasing large amounts of currency, but these efforts proved futile. Ultimately, the British government announced significant interest rate hikes, but even these measures failed to restore confidence. On the evening of September 16, 1992, the government decided to exit the ERM and float the pound, marking a significant defeat for the British financial strategy. Questions. Where and from whom did the Quantum Fund borrow the $10 billion? The Quantum Fund borrowed from various sources, including banks and financial institutions that were willing to lend against the pound, leveraging the expectations of currency depreciation. Who knew about the $2.5 billion loss during the 8 weeks of membership in the Snake in 1972? The loss was known to the British government officials and financial analysts at the time, but the extent of the implications would only be fully understood in hindsight as a precursor to future currency crises. http://www.gutenberg.org/cash/epub/8489/pg8489.html. Hope without an object cannot live. This land is mine, Henry George, and the single land tax https://t.co/t7-2u5sc8xu via at rld_real_cpr. Real RLD at rld_real_r, December 30th, 2020. Ping back. Who are the priests and the princes of peak oil? There are three peak oil subjects: the narrative myth, the actual output and investment figures, and oil wars. Not the Grub Street Journal. Bilderberg the movie does a good job of the story from the first the Bilderberg meeting. Who ate all the pies? Bilderberg the movie, the new hydrocarbon/oil standard. 280 views, 3 years ago, show more. Tone Frex. 846 subscribers. Bilderberg the movie. https://nothegrubstreetjournal.com/2021/12/13/who-8-all-the-pies-2. Notes and references. In producing a post such as this one is really thinking out loud. Often such an exercise produces more questions, sometimes better questions. Previous questions which have informed my own direction of inquiry are these two. To whom do we owe this money exactly? Ariadne's ball of string. Back to Golem. To whom do we owe this money? Strudy blog Golem, the slog Robin Smith. Dr. Adrian Wrigley #Richard Werner https://t.co/1k6dchexavia @rld_real_pr. Real RLD @rld_real_pr. December 30th, 2020. To whom do we owe this money exactly? My debt to Sturdy blog in Golem 14. Motley Fool Cliff Darcy the spirit level. Golem 14 positive money. The Grub Street Journal and #Kongstoff do https://t.co/5dqi7uaws8 via @rld_real_cpr. Real RLD @rld_real_pr. December 30th, 2020. Giving a tuppence for first-time buyers. The acronym soup of macro-prudential skin in the game. Bricks without straw and quote. The nothing you get for something before you can buy anything and quote wink with a frown Saudi. https://t.co/k0tsvk 1n via @rld_real_pr. Real RLD @rld_real_pr. December 30th, 2020. Refs. Basically what's open in my browser following hitting publish. http://stormclouds.herenG.com/covid-the-Orwellian nightmare/utm_source equals feed burner_medium equals email_campaign equals feed %a plus storm clouds gathering plus %new plus content plus on plus storm clouds. COVID-19 the Orwellian nightmare and how to fight back. The COVID-19 pandemic is being used as a pretext for the most extreme power grab in history, but by overextending themselves the ruling elite are setting themselves up to lose everything. https://www.gresham.ac.uk/lectures-and-events/the-growth-of-Euroscepticism. https://www.gresham.ac.uk/series/Britain-and-Europe. https://www.gresham.ac.uk/professors-and-professor-vernon-bogdaner-FBA-CBE. The 1925 Return to Gold, Keynes and Mr. Churchill's Economic Crisis. James Ashley Morrison. Middlebury College. APSA, 2009. https://sites.middlebury.edu/morrison/files/2010/02/morrisoncv.pdf. https://fliphtml5.com/kdhx/plox/basic. A Monetary Revolution. John Locke and the Creation of England's Fixed Exchange Rate Regime J. A. Morrison Middlebury College October 2008. https://www.gold.org/sites/default/files/documents/1925july.pdf. The Heyday of the Gold Standard, 1820 to 1930. 140. 1925 July. The Economic Consequences of Mr. Churchill, John. Maynard Keynes published a broad-ranging attack on Britain's return to the gold standard in 1925, in which he argued that Britain had returned to the gold standard at too high a parity. He suggested that committing to the pre-war parity would ultimately prove deflationary with deleterious consequences for employment and growth. In this excerpt, Keynes rejects The financial community's unanimity in favor of a return to the gold standard, a consensus of opinion that is illustrated in several of the immediately previous documents. Keynes. Analysis proved prescient. Hashtag FUD edition hashtag Grub Street Journal. https://www.yumpu.com/s/ylv4kybad 2 jcnhnt. The Trade of the Century, when George Soros broke the British pound. https://priceeconomics.com/the-trade-of-the-century- when George Soros broke. Mr. Churchill's exercise, the Treasury Minute and Responses 1925. https://www.yumpu.com/s/dlqpmdfsmuf5qr9s. https://nothygrubstreetjournal.com/?s=Coleridge plus table plus talk. Hope without an object cannot live. This land is mine, Henry George and the single land tax. Hope without an object cannot live. This land is mine, Henry George and the single land tax. https://t.co/t7 2u5sc8xu via @rld_real_cpr hashtag constofdo. Real RLD @RLD_real_cpr December 30th, 2020. https://envirowatchring word pre-ss.com. It's no accident the entire world faces rising house prices, homelessness, poverty. Watch Bilderberg the movie, learn who really controls the world. Housing NZ News. It's no accident the entire world faces rising house prices, homelessness and poverty. Watch Bilderberg the movie and learn who really controls the world. https://vimeo.com/ondemand/Bilderberg the movie /259660263. Bilderberg, the movie, written and produced by Daniel Estulin, directed by Joan Cutrina. https://envirowatchring word pre-ss.com. It's no accident the entire world faces rising house prices, homelessness, poverty. Watch Bilderberg the movie, learn who really controls the world. https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/Daniel_Estulin. https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/Lyndon_LaRouche. https://web/20070830163449/http://www.counterpunch.org/estulin052720005.html. Murió la verdad. Infiltrating Bilderberg, 2005. By Daniel Estulin, May 27, 2005. Coal and oil. The dark monarchs of global energy, understanding supply and extraction patterns and their importance for future production. https://www.diva-portal.org/get/diva2:343046/fulltext0 1.pdf. https://artsanculture.google.com/cultural institute/beta/asset/truth-has-died-mori% C3% B3-la-verde-francisco-de-goya/iwe3oxg2_pmn_q. https://not-the-grubstreet-journal.com/timonism, the Calvinist strain in neoliberal misanthropy, Zionism, the money power usury and the petrodollar fall of the Roman Empire. https://not-the-grubstreet-journal.com/Syria illegal strikes aftermath, mission accomplished, Tor sighting, shot gatekeepers, controlled opposition and false flags. For days to declare a Cold War. By Thierry Meisen. The week that has just ended was exceptionally rich in events. But no media were able to report it, because they had all deliberately masked certain of their number in order to protect the story that was being woven by their government. London had attempted to provoke a major conflict, but lost to Russia, President Trump, and Syria. https://www.voltairenet.org/article200232.html. https://wikispooks.com/wiki/Thierry_Maysan. https://wikispooks.com/wiki/document: who underscore is underscore the underscore enemy percent sign 3F. https://nothygrubstreetjournal.com/2017/03/30/money-creation much more important than article 50 the nature of power follow the money. https://notthegrubstreetjournal.com/to whom do this money exactly debt to sturdy blogging Golem 14 Motley Fool Cliff Darcy the spirit level Golem 14 positive money the Grub Street Journal and Sankstio Flash. https://notthegrubstreetjournal.com/, giving a tuppence for first-time buyers, the acronym SUPUV macro-prudential skin in the game bricks without straw and the nothing you get for something before you can buy anything Saudi/. https://notthegrubstreetjournal.com/, don't get tango reject the Birino Kool-Aid Tialita City and call 70W Ovingers Birino wiki underscore ballot pamphleteers Grubstreet Yorno Suarviation wiki underscore ballot financiales wiki. https://nothygrubstreetjournal.com/2019/07/12/hot-type-on-the-middle-east-gnome-chomsky-interviewed-by-evan-solomon-cbc-news world 2002 Jekyll Island The Truth Behind the Federal Reserve 2013 Bill Still Free download, borrow, and streaming Internet Archive https://t.co/vcl6z-asqq via at Internet Archive. Real RLD at RLD_real_CPR December 30th, 2020. https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/bank_war. The bank war was a political struggle that developed over the issue of rechartering the Second Bank of the United States, BUS, during the presidency of Andrew Jackson, 1829 to 1837. The affair resulted in the shutdown of the bank and its replacement by state banks. https://nothygrubstreetjournal.com/2017/03/30/money-creation much more important than article 50 the nature of power follow the money. https://notthegrubstreetjournal.com/, the magic money tray in private banks misunderstood in kind to small children and animals are just another fix of crony capitalists/ https://notthegrubstreetjournal.com/Timonism the Calvinist strain in neoliberal misanthropy Zionism the money power usury and the petrodollar fall of the Roman Empire https://kype diameter org/wiki/gnomes_on. Anglo-American financial rivalry in the 1920s Frank C. Castigliola https://www.socred.org/images/other-authors/the-enemy-within-the-short-history-of-bank-butler.pdf. British monetary policy 1924 to 1931 The Norman Conquest of $4.86 https://t.co/1qkpr Real RLD at RLD_real_PR December 30th, 2020. https://www.economics.uteranto.ca/index.php/person/person/faculty/50 https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/piero_srafa https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/srafa%sign E2%sign 80%sign 93 Hayek_debate https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/a_treatise_on_money Dr. Hayek on Money and Capital Piero Sraffa https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/theory_of_value_economics https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/mika%sign C5%sign 82_KLCKI https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/Joan_Robinson https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/Maurice_Daub https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/Frank_Ramsey_mathematician https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/Ian.Wikipedia e2%sign, e2%sign 83 Lewis method. https://not-he-grubstreet-journal.com/2020/12/19/monetary-policy-1924-193-1-the-norman-conquest-of-4-866-Mogridge. https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/first_lord_of_the_treasury. https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/Tory. https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/Whigs_British_political_party. https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/conservative_party_UK. https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/p-elite. https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/liberal_party_UK. https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/list_of_of_prime_ministers_the_united_kingdom #sign 20th century. https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/chancellor_of_the_exchequer. https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/John_major. https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/European_exchange_rate_mechanism. https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/Black_Wednesday. https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/Norman_Lamont. https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/Lord_High_Treasurer. https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/first_big_junto. https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/Charles_Montague, 1st_Earl_of_Halifax. https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/Godolphin%sign, e2%sign 80%sign, 93 Marlborough_ministry. https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/Vernon_Bogdaner. https://www.gresham.ac.uk/lectures-and-events/leaving-the-erm-1992. https://www.gresham.ac.uk/series/political-crises-since-1945. https://www.gresham.ac.uk/lectures-and-events/the-national-health-service-crisis-1951. https://www.gresham.ac.uk/lectures-and-events/the-IMF-crisis-1976. https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/snake_in_the_tunnel. https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/sterling_area. https://www.scrowup.com/mediacenter/speeches/research/Britain and the Euro 10 years after there is history repeating itself. https://warwick.ac.uk/fac/people/kettle/research/erm.pdf. https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/causes_of_the_great_recession. https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/marmion_poem. https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/1976_IMF_crisis. https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/bank_of_England_act_1946. https://www.bankofengland.co.uk/who-owns-the-bank-of-england. https://www.bankofengland.co.uk/archive/digitized-documents. https://www.bankofengland.co.uk/about/people/court-of-directors number-sign-court minutes. https://www.bankofengland.co.uk/archive/directors-annual-lists-1694-1950. https://www.bankofengland.co.uk/archive/index-to-original-subscribers-to-dash-stock-1694. https://www.bankofengland.co.uk/media/bo/files/archive/original-bank-subscribers/16994.pdf?mark-la n####A8027ADBA 218D0C588YF8F30 1D6425C4F 3DC851D. https://www.information-britain.co.uk/famdates.php?id =663. https://n.wikipedia.org/wiki/william_scon_banker. https://5-things-you-might-like-to-know-about-the-like-to-know-about-the-5-3-of-52b0 cf. https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/john_Hoblon. https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/huguenots. https://not-he-grubstreet-journal.com/2017/03/26/on-the-present-discontent-burke-opine-conquest-of-do. https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/maximilian_b%sign C3%sign A9 thun, Duke_of_Sully. https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/nicodemite. https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/calvinism. https://n.wikipedia.org/wiki/william_Patterson banker. https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/Darian_scheme. https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/company_of_Scotland. https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/supercargo.